Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 5, Episode 12. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. Ho-way the lads, kids. Ho-way the lads. Newcastle United wins its first trophy in over 70 years, the League Cup and the English Premier League. I take a victory lap as a Newcastle United fan, and the NCAA tournament. That's right. I'm actually going to discuss my picks, and I picked the University of Tennessee to win the whole thing. Why the hell not? If you've come along on this ride for years, thank you very much. I appreciate all those loyal, dear listeners. If you're new to the podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon.
Act 1. Ho-way the lads. Newcastle wins the League Cup.
Ho-way the lads! Ho-way the lads! Newcastle United, who under the stewardship of Mike Ashley, was relegated 3 times. 3 fucking times this team was relegated. Just won the Premier League Cup. What is that, you might ask? Well, there are a couple of in-season tournaments in the Premier League that are kind of like the Super Bowl Sunday for the NFL. The weird thing about the English Premier League and all of these top-flight soccer leagues is that you play for points, and at the end of the season, the team with the most points wins. More often than not, 1 or 2 teams pull away from the pack, and you have a very lackluster, I'll go as far to say anticlimactic ending to the season, because you have one team that's so far ahead on points that there's no real drama. There's no competition at the end of the season. It's almost a foregone conclusion, and the only thing that teams are competing for, the European tournaments, namely the Champions League. In the English Premier League, there are 2 in-season tournaments. One is called the FA Cup, one is called the League Cup. The FA Cup, it's every team in English soccer. So we're talking about these clubs that are in towns that have thousands of people, all the way to these billion-dollar clubs that we see on TV all the time, that you hear about on television, social media all the time. It's a very unique concept. The first FA Cup game, I believe, was played in like 1897. Wait a minute, I'm thinking of hockey. It was actually like 1870. I believe the FA Cup is the oldest, what we'll call elimination competition in the entire world. Of course, back then there weren't nearly as many clubs, but the point being that you have hundreds of clubs that are competing in this one competition. And yes, because you have these tiny, tiny clubs that are eligible for participation, they have a tournament within a tournament where they basically eliminate one another. All of the teams that win get to go and play in the next round. They're summarily dismissed, dispatched, if you will, by some of these bigger clubs. And then you have an elimination competition to get to the winner. And it was Manchester United versus Manchester City that played for it last year, and Manchester United won it. So they are the current title holders. The other cup, the other elimination cup in season in the Premier League, is what's called the League Cup. Now, this is the top 4 club soccer leagues all play in a tournament. So there is no smaller division where they have to basically eliminate one another and then they get the opportunity to get their asses kicked by the bigger clubs. This is the top 4 leagues all in a tournament playing one another, and you routinely see, like the NCAA tournament, and I've spoken to this before in other podcast segments, it's like the NCAA tournament for English Premier League soccer. You see smaller division clubs routinely upset first and second tier clubs, that being the Championship, which is the second tier in the Premier League, and the Premier League, which is the top 20 clubs in England. Newcastle United took on Liverpool in the Championship for the League Cup, a team that they haven't beaten in, I believe, 4 years in all competitions. Yes, that's right, dear listener. The team that Newcastle played, Liverpool, they had not beaten them in any competition, whether that be a regular season Premier League match, whether it be in one of these elimination tournaments. They hadn't beaten them in years. add injury to that insult, Liverpool is far and away the best club in the Premier League this year. They're going to win. They have amassed so many points that it's highly unlikely they're going to have an absolute collapse for any team to catch them. And you say, is there anything else that I could add to that? Let me throw in a heaping, steaming pile of shit. Newcastle hasn't won any kind of competition in 70 years. 70 years. Newcastle had several great teams throughout the course of the 90s and then in the early aughts leading up to the acquisition of that team, of that club by Mike Ashley. If you want a good analogy of what happened in Newcastle, they were one of those teams that almost made it. They were knocking on the door for a long time, and because they were so close, the prior owners went and spent a lot of money, recklessly, unfortunately, as it turned out, and it put the club in such dire financial situations that they were rife for being acquired by someone like Mike Ashley that was just looking for value. He didn't give a damn about wins and losses. He didn't give a damn about tradition. For him, it was all dollars and cents. So he saw an undervalued asset. He acquired it, and he was able to turn it into one of the most lucrative clubs in the Premier League and, in fact, in the world. If you want to give Mike Ashley any credit, it's that Newcastle United made him a lot of money. But they were a piss-poor product on the field, and everyone knew it. In comes that Saudi oil money, new ownership, they start to invest in the club gets better and better, better results, better consistency, and here they are playing for what is, as many in England call it, their Super Bowl Sunday, March 16th, against Liverpool, the championship for the League Cup. Newcastle's last hardware, their last trophy was, in fact, the League Cup. And you want to know how long ago it was that they won that cup? Queen Elizabeth II, the one that just passed away, had just recently ascended to the crown, and she was the one who awarded Newcastle the League Cup. Now they call it the Carabao Cup for some stupid sponsorship bullshit. I mean, I'm not calling it that because I'm not getting any kind of sponsorship dollars from them. It's still the League Cup to me. But now some guy from the sponsor gives them the cup. Traditions be damned. I mean, would I have liked to see the King of England give them the cup? Hell yeah, I would. And I would like to have seen him address them all as sir. Each and every one of the players deserved as much. Special shout out to Isak, who's been a killer this season. The center forward for Newcastle United, their number 9. He's been absolutely ruthless. He scored another goal in this match that was disallowed. I mean, we're talking about fractions of an inch by way of a video review to get him offsides. And yet he came right back and scored another goal. Shout out to Dan Byrne, who comes from the Newcastle area, who grew up in the area. He plays for the club that he loves. It's one of those stories that you see in sports on occasion, but unfortunately it's rare these days where hometown kid grows up, prodigy, makes it to the bigs, and he plays for the club, the team he always loved. I have to give a special shout out to Tonali, who was injured at the beginning of the season, and I had one of my tantrum segments earlier this year talking about how listless Newcastle United looked without him. They couldn't move the ball through the midfield. They couldn't possess the ball very well. And they didn't have those really precise attacking passes that have allowed so many of the talented Newcastle players to run down the field, whether it be down the middle or on the sides. This team is in such a rhythm right now that they can attack you in a number of different ways. There isn't one part of the field that they're specializing in. They just played arguably the best team in the world, certainly the best team in the Premier League, and it wasn't until extra time that Liverpool scored their goal. And that was not an anomaly. Liverpool had their chances, of course, in the first 90 minutes, but Newcastle carried the pace of play. Liverpool was on their back foot for several stretches of that match, and even though Newcastle looked to be the better team, as a fan, you're still nervous because they haven't beaten this team in forever, and this is the best team in the Premier League this season. Liverpool never found that next gear. They never turned on their offense such that it was a threat to Newcastle's defense, particularly in the second half. Newcastle with the 2-0 lead felt comfortable, but of course you get that one goal that goes in and you freak out. Well, that one goal didn't occur until stoppage time in the second half, and even though I was worried about it because the referee ended up giving Liverpool this ungodly amount of time, I believe that match went into stoppage time close to 110 minutes. So let's put that into perspective. It's a 90-minute match, and you have stoppage time that can go for 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes. If you see 8 minutes of stoppage time at the end of a match, that's a lot. This rolled right past 100 minutes. It was a more conspiratorial Patrick would have thought this shit is scripted. Like they are giving Liverpool every chance possible to get back into this match, to tie this up so it has to go into extra time and potentially a shootout. Newcastle was able to weather that storm. I'm happy for Eddie Howe. I'm happy for all of the people who are involved in Newcastle's under-19 developmental league and all of its marketing and business development. There's actually a scouting department, all of the people in middle management, and you've got to give it to them, all of the people that are principals of the Saudi Public Investment Fund's entity, that we will call it, the entity that actually now owns Newcastle United. They have been patient. They have been diligent. They've built a team that can win. They've built a team that is young enough where I am optimistic that there are more trophies, there's more hardware for Newcastle in the future. When you're a club like Manchester United or Liverpool, Liverpool has won the League Cup, I believe, 14 times. These types of trophies are somewhat pedestrian. But when you're a club like Newcastle that hasn't won anything in 70 years, this is like the Super Bowl. Do I see Champions League opportunities for Newcastle in the future? Yes, I do. One can only dream that they would win that holy grail, so to speak, be able to not only get in that competition, sustain themselves, be able to stay competitive in the Premier League and in the Champions League, and my God, maybe even win it. After what I've just seen, it's all possible. I have that thing that is the most fulfilling and most damning thing that a sports fan can have, and that's hope. Away the lads!
Act 2, my NCAA tournament breakdown, or Let's Go Volunteers.
Yeah, I have the Volunteers winning it all. What of it? I rarely speak boldly about my NCAA bracket, my predictions, my picks. And this Tennessee Volunteers team doesn't offer me anything different than what I got in the last 3 or 4 seasons. Tennessee has been a top seed and has been knocked out, not making the Final Four one time. What would be different about this team? First of all, it's not necessarily this team, it's the rest of college basketball. I don't see a team that Tennessee couldn't beat. Yes, Duke is really good. Yes, Houston's really good. There's other really good teams. But I don't see a team that a Tennessee team that plays good team defense, that a Tennessee team that executes on offense, and most important, a Tennessee team that doesn't turn the ball over couldn't beat. The other thing I found encouraging about this Tennessee team is that, yes, they had their games where they had offensive lulls. They looked terrible. It was one of those things where I could have come on this podcast and said, these kids don't seem to know anything about basketball except that it's round. But Tennessee had other games, like when they were at Illinois, Illinois being an NCAA tournament team, and they won on a last-second buzzer-beater shot where Tennessee had to drive the length of the court to score. There was the Alabama game where Tennessee was down, I believe, by 5 with less than a minute left and came back and won that game against an Alabama team that's not only an NCAA tournament team, but that legitimately thought at one point they had a shot at a number 1 seed. Again, Tennessee winning that game on a last-minute shot, a buzzer beater. This is a deep Tennessee team. There are a number of capable players at each position. There are a number of upperclassmen at each position. There are a number of players that on a given night can score and score effortlessly. And the kids play great defense. There will be no doubt some upsets in this tournament, but it really looks to me like one of those years where the higher seeds are all going to move through and we're going to have a Final Four that looks typical of a Final Four where you've got a 1, a 2, a 3, or maybe a 4 seed from each bracket. Another thing I did in picking my bracket, only because I've seen so many of the teams play, I went with a lot of the SEC teams if I didn't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. If I was just looking at these two teams and it was, say, Arkansas versus Kansas, I didn't see much of Kansas this season. I did see a little bit of Arkansas, and just given the absolute gauntlet that was the SEC in college basketball this year, I'm going with Arkansas. It did concern me, yes, that Kentucky was in the same bracket as Tennessee, and Kentucky and Tennessee are destined to meet again in the Elite Eight. Why do I say again? Kentucky and Tennessee played twice during the regular season, and Kentucky won both matchups, which I was surprised by. This Kentucky team that I thought would have a lot more turmoil after John Calipari leaves the program, they played very well, not only in Kentucky, but surprisingly in Knoxville, where Rick Barnes had their number the last few seasons. They were hard-fought games. It was, as you would expect, between rivals like Kentucky and Tennessee. Looking at that matchup, thinking to myself, is Kentucky going to beat Tennessee 3 times in one season? Sure, it happens, but you do hear it all the time. It's a common refrain in college sports, but particularly in basketball, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in one season. That puts Tennessee on a collision course with Houston, a Houston team that is extremely athletic and very much like Tennessee plays very strong defense and has a slower pace of play. I don't think Purdue can beat Houston. I think Houston will be in the Elite Eight, and I think Tennessee can beat a Houston team that they can score with and hold to less than 60 points. If that game is 63-58, I like Tennessee's chances. If that game scores in the 70s or even in the low 80s, I love Tennessee's chances. And although Florida is a juggernaut, and Florida did beat Tennessee to win the SEC tournament, I have St. John's coming out and beating Florida in that Elite Eight matchup. Everyone loves Duke, but after seeing Alabama play several times this season, I think Alabama is Final Four bound. In the South, you have Auburn at that number 1 seed and Michigan State at the number 2 seed. I like Michigan after looking so good in the Big Ten tournament, and I think Iowa State's a great basketball team, but I have that Auburn-Michigan State matchup, a 1-2, and I have Michigan State winning it. It's hard to go against Izzo in the spring in the NCAA tournament. The man coaches his team specifically to be playing at their best at this time of year. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know why I did it. I have St. John's beating Michigan State, and I have Tennessee beating Alabama. Tennessee beats St. John's in the national championship game to win its first national championship in men's college basketball. Is it a pipe dream? I'm sure it is. Do I care? No, I don't. I felt relatively nervous about these other Tennessee teams given Rick Barnes' track record in the NCAA tournament, and we might as well get that monkey off of my back, off of his back this year. The man has a terrible NCAA record for as long as he's coached and for as high a quality a basketball team that he's been able to bring to bear in the NCAA tournament. I mentioned this in one of the other podcasts I did on the NCAA tournament and Tennessee's track record, but more Rick Barnes' track record, the fact that he had a 500 record in the NCAA tournament and it was like 50-51 or 51-50. You think about that, to have 100 games in a single elimination tournament is a testament to the consistency that you have to bring teams to that tournament, and yet the consistency that you have to have in order to get knocked out early on. I'm a huge proponent of it. If you listen to this podcast for more than 6 months a year, you know I don't bash the players anymore. I don't bash the coaches anymore. I do not criticize general managers. You can generally find the problem or the solution to any team in any sport, and that's at the head of the snake. It's the owner. A good owner will generally have a consistently competitive team that they can put on a field, and a bad owner will have a consistently bad team. Rick Barnes is the CEO, the general manager, the owner of each one of the basketball teams that he's brought to the NCAA tournament. I want, as a Tennessee Volunteers fan and as a fan of Rick Barnes as their head coach, I think he's done a great job. He's been a great ambassador for the program. He has been consistent. He's helped a lot of kids come through the program, get their college degree, learn a lot about basketball, learn a lot about life. It would be nice to see him shed this 20-year, 25-year shadow that he's had, not being able to go deep into the NCAA tournament with these teams that have been between a 1 and a 4 seed. Given that this podcast comes out on a Saturday and that the tournament's already started, I know that Tennessee will be playing UCLA on Saturday. This podcast will have already been published, so the next obstacle is the UCLA Bruins. I do not underestimate the Fighting Mick Cronin's. He was a great coach at Cincinnati. He always had teams that were competitive, particularly on the defensive end. So I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk, but I see Tennessee coming out victorious, leading to a rematch with Kentucky. Does that mean I won't be rooting for Troy or for who I have in my bracket, Xavier, to beat Kentucky? Of course. Of course. It would not hurt my feelings at all if Tennessee had to play Troy or Xavier. Survive in advance, kids. This is Why Don't Vote, a podcast.